to go live in Europe for 5 months afterwards. But it was an incredible thing. I mean, I got to do everything. We handled the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus, and I got to ride an elephant. And in the article that I provided you, it was the high point and the low point of that summer because I got to ride the elephant, but I also split my pants on the. And I had to be really pretty modest in how getting back to the car and back to the agency so I could change my clothes. It was really, really, really interesting. So you're going to have to bear with me. I've not used this before, but here we are. Okay. Last week, a famous advertising man died, and his name was Stan Freberg, and he was one of the most creative people that I have ever seen in the business. He transformed the way radio and television commercials were done, and he was just incredibly creative and never took himself too seriously. He has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and he appeared on the Dick Cavett Show, which was a talk show way back in the 70s. But I went online, and there was a clip of him being on the show, and I was really happy to be able to see it. He said that he was sidetracked in the ad business from a successful career as a radio and TV satirist because he disliked the way most advertisers attempted to communicate with him as a consumer. And I thought, wow, that's really true. And I remember they played some of his comedy albums in my advertising copywriting class, and I don't know if students even ever heard of Stan Freberg, but they are available online, and it's just some amazing stuff. So in his book, It Only Hurts When I Laugh, he wrote, and I want to get this quote correct, if you don't like an ad, why should anybody else? We're all consumers. That's why I always create commercials for myself, first of all. I am the consumer. I know best. If I think it's a great commercial, and get this, I figure the rest of the people might think so too. So I haven't been wrong so far. So I remember that quote from 40 years ago, and that's the way I have created my career. I have always had a creative point of view on things that I wanted done, and if I didn't like an ad, I didn't do it. And I would argue with the client and my supervisors and anybody else who would hear me, because at the end of the day, I was responsible for what was being produced. And if I didn't like it, nobody else is going to like it. I was sure of that. So I think that I would take responsibility for it, and even if it was bad copy or I was put in a really awful situation, I would still go ahead and try to make it as good as I possibly could. And if I could just incrementally, we refer to it at the agency as pushing the peanut down the road. If we could make it a little bit better than what it was going to be, we were going to do it. And so that's why I create commercials for myself, first of all. Now, we're talking about, I was 21 when I got my first copywriting job. And I couldn't believe, I had scored this job. I was working in an advertising agency. I was writing copy. I was meeting with clients. I was coming up with creative ideas. I was doing all this stuff, and I was scared shitless. I thought I was in over my head for sure, and that someday that they were, like tomorrow, they were going to find out that this was all a fraud and I really couldn't write. But I would go back to the agency, and I'd work until 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night on rewriting the copy and putting it aside and working on something else and going back to it and making it work and so forth. I mean, we did work for Chrysler Plymouth. I worked on the introduction of Mazda automobiles to North America. I got to work with Ringling Brothers, and I worked with the Harlem Globetrotters and the Mexican National Rodeo, and I got to meet all these incredible people here in Fresno. And, I grew up here, and, nobody knows anything about San Joaquin Valley outside of California. And so I thought, I would like to live someplace else maybe, or I'd like maybe to go to school someplace else, get a master's or something. But I can learn here. I can work on my craft. I can learn. I can make a lot of mistakes, and who's gonna know? So it was just me and this idea that someday I wanted to work in advertising. But I want to back up just a moment, because I went to Roosevelt High School, and there were a lot of kids that lived in the sunny side. I lived on the wrong side of the tracks. I lived in Canada, and not the nicest neighborhood. And my dad worked at the Santa Fe Railroad, so we wanted to be close to work. And I was a senior, and I was on being interviewed for the National Merit Scholarship program. And my best friend was going to go into law. Another guy was going to be a surgeon. One of my colleagues, who actually lives in Seattle now, wanted to go to Broadway, and she had already done a lot of acting and done community theater and done productions with me and so forth. And Shelley Hamlin was a golfer, and she won the National Junior golf tournament that year, and came back to the high school band, met her at the airport, and she came down the stairs of the airport. I mean, it was just like out of a movie. But we were all there, and we were being interviewed, until I said, they asked me what I wanted to do and what kind of career I wanted, and I said, I really want to go into advertising. And they just looked at me in stunned silence. It was like I wanted to go become a prostitute or something. They just couldn't believe I wanted to go, you want to make commercials? And I said, yeah. I said, it's the golden age of advertising. There's all this going on, and people are learning, and television is interesting, and radio's great, and billboards can be exciting, and it could be for the good of the community. And they just didn't. I was, needless to say, I didn't get the scholarship. And, but I got a $50 scholarship from Roosevelt High School to come to Fresno State. And my first semester cost $53. So, and parking was $13. So I was able, I was working for a Santa Brands paint company downtown, and I was making $2 an hour in the evenings, and so I was able to pay for my school. So I graduated in 1972 with zero debt, because I wouldn't, first of all, Fresno State wouldn't give me any financial aid, and second of all, I thought, I just need to do it. It's just part of, it's just do it, and that's where I am. So, let's see where we are. Oh, I work for Mr. Media and Associates for Al Geller, and I worked for Mike Thielen, and they had bigger, nicer accounts and really nice offices, and it was air conditioned, which I thought was pretty. It was the first time I'd ever worked in an office that was air conditioned. So, and I got to wear a suit to the office. I did. I had a suit and I wore it. It was lots of fun. And he came from a career in outdoor advertising, and really was well connected. And he was on the board of directors of a big outdoor advertising company up in Seattle. And when my agency did a new brochure about, it had my name on it, because it was called Fisher Brady and LaBrue at the time. And we had all these clients like Nordstrom and so forth. And so I got a copy of it, and I mailed it to him with a little note on the inside and said, thank you so much for your help. You've made my career. And I felt really good. I never heard back from it, but just the fact that I could do that, it really made me feel good that the start that I got really paid off. And that those $2 an hour that he paid me was good money. So I moved from, I worked in San Francisco, and then I got a call from Nordstrom, which at the time was, they had about 20 stores, and they had just purchased stores in Alaska, and they needed somebody, they were full-line department stores. Nordstrom at that time had only been men's and women's fashions and shoes, and cosmetics and things like that. And so they desperately needed somebody with my background in what they call hard lines, like electronics and appliances and radios and things like that, televisions, microwaves. And so he had nobody in the company that knew how to do any of that sort of thing. So they needed to hire me, and they needed to hire me fast because there was a lot of new advertising that was coming. So the first day I was there, they sat me down, they said, Terry, you have to introduce Nordstrom to Alaska. And my stomach just fell. I thought, I was going to, once again I thought, they're going to find out I'm a fraud. But I actually turned it around, and I worked really hard, and I worked with some marvelous people, really talented writers and designers and illustrators, and just wonderful, wonderful people. And we pulled it off, and the launch in Alaska was really, really successful. We made millions and millions of dollars. And it that success set them up for going public. So in 1976, I think, they went public. And they've been a family-owned company. And their stock opened at $19 a share, and it went to 25, like, in a couple of weeks. And they were just thrilled that this regional retailer was working. So I helped them go public, and then they entered California market, and now they've got 300 stores, and they're listed on the New York Stock Exchange, and really successful, nice, good company. And if you want to buy a pair of shoes, that's a place to go. I was after I left Nordstrom, I went to work for a small advertising agency, but then I thought, I think I want to work on the client side. I want to see how that works. I've never worked on the client side. I've never hired an advertising agency. I've never hired a PR firm. I've never directed a national rollout for a national campaign. So Cucina was a regional restaurant company. It was called Quality Fast Casual. And they had really, really fun Italian food, and the food was excellent. And the people that ran it had been in the restaurant business for a long time. My mom was in the restaurant business, so I had an opportunity to know something about it. And so they said, well, we're going to do this national expansion, and we need somebody that has restaurant experience to do this. But they didn't tell me what their schedule was when they hired me. So we opened 14 full-line Italian restaurants in 5 western states in 9 months. And that was a killer. It was just, it was the year from hell. But they won, we got them to be Nation's Restaurants News, which is the restaurant magazine in the United States. They were the hot concept for that. They were on the cover of Pizza Times. They were listed by Hoopers and Lybrand as the best new company in the United States. They were listed as the best place to work. They got awards in every city that they did, and we rolled out their market, their brand in all these new markets where nobody had heard of Cucina, and it was really successful. So I was happy. But at the end of the year, at the end of my contract, I said, I'm out of here. So it took me a couple of months to decompress after that. But you do what you can, but you have to decide what's best for you. So even though I was really well paid and I had carte blanche eating in any of the restaurants wherever I went, it was wonderful. But you can just have too much gelato at some point. So and pasta. The Alaska Airlines has been another long-term client. I've never worked as an employee for Alaska, but it's a great brand. It's continuously listed as #1 by J.D. Power and Associates. It has fended off national carriers. Right now, Delta is trying to take over a lot of business out of Seattle. Alaska Airlines is the dominant airline on the West Coast. And it used to be Western before that, and before that it was United. And Alaska has come in and flown, very well. airlines are, I mean, the airplanes are clean, the in-flight service is good. It's, they took a regional Alaska airline, because they used to be headquartered in Anchorage, and then they moved to Seattle right at the time that I moved to Seattle in 1975. And they had, when I worked at Nordstrom, I did a project with them. They had 10 planes, and they're number 5 in size in the United States now. And they've gone into Hawaii. They're I think they send as many people to Hawaii as Hawaiian Airlines does. So that tells you that an airline named Alaska can fly to Hawaii too. So it's really interesting. And you might have seen the new campaign that they're doing now. It's called Beyond, and they've upgraded the food on the airline. They've done new entertainment system. They are improved their website and so forth. And I had a little bit to do with that. But it's a great airline. It's a wonderful client to have on your resume, believe me. I've done work for several airlines. I did work for Air Polynesia, which is in Papeete, Tahiti, which is, I love client meetings because I got to fly there, and photo shoots, and we redesigned the planes, and we did new branding for them and did their new logo, and I got to, the only time I ever got to design flight attendants' outfits, and we did the shirts for the ticket agents and the ticket booths and so forth. But it's, they only had, probably a dozen planes that flew in and around the Polynesia. But it was really fun, and they were owned and run by an American and a French guy, and who fought all the time. But they were really, really nice. They were really nice to me. So in the 90s, I was hired by Fluke Corporation as a vendor, because I could, by this time I'd been 20 years in advertising, and they knew that I could parachute into any of their divisions and do work for them. Fluke these are handheld electronic test tools. That's a digital multimeter. And they are the largest manufacturer of those test items in the world. And they're located in Everett, Washington. And if you're not into electronics, or you don't do wiring for construction or something like that, or you're not in the military, or you're not in manufacturing or so forth, you may not have heard of them, but they have 80% of the world market for that product sector. And it's just amazing. It's a couple of $1 billion worth of company every year. And so they knew that I had worked in a couple of various places, and that they could rely on me to sit down and do the work. And not as an employee, because I was kind of like a hired gun. I could not get caught up in the fact that a lot of these issues that were going on, I didn't have to go to the United Way conference. I didn't have to do the strategic planning. I didn't have to evaluate people. All those things that you work in a large company, that half of your time, I'm sure in academia as well, that you get involved in all this other paperwork and you don't have time to do your job. But I was there, and we got to introduce a bunch of new products, and I introduced this product, and we had 3 safety recalls, and we had, I was saying I got to go to Thailand on a photo shoot to write a day in the life of this plant that they had in Thailand, where they made some of the parts for this. And really, really interesting stuff. I mean, it was just fascinating. And I didn't know from digital multimeters at all when I went to work for them, but I was smart enough to ask the right questions and talk to the right people, and really get into the company and make it successful. And after 7 years, I really had written everything I could about digital multimeters. And so I said, I think the party's over for me, but if you need help, or if you need a good transition, I'm happy to do that. And so that's how it happened. So, but I already had some new business, so digital multimeters or writing for Holland America, which you want to do. So I made a decision. One of my more interesting projects was in 1992. Is the George Bush the first, the father, the other George Bush. 40, yes. Was running for re-election. He had been the vice president under Ronald Reagan for 8 years, and then he was elected president in 1988, and he was running for re-election in 1992. And he was running against Bill Clinton, but the deciding factor in that election wasn't Bill Clinton at all, and people forget this, that it was Ross Perot, who was a third-party candidate, who ran and siphoned off just enough of the Republican vote that he lost the election. He lost re-election. And he had also broken his promise on new taxes. But I worked with his campaign and wrote radio commercials. When he went to a city, he would talk with the local congressman or local Republican people, and I actually got to produce radio commercials with the President of the United States. And it was just incredible. And I didn't do it all over the United States, I just did it in the Northwest and Alaska. But it was fascinating, and he is one of the most underrated presidents we've ever had. He was terrific. And he, put together the Gulf War in 91 in Kuwait. And he brought together more countries in more ways than anybody has done before or since. I think you have to go back to FDR or possibly JFK to have, because he knew all these people. He was the ambassador to the UN. He was head of the CIA. He was, he just had this incredible resume. But he's still alive, but people don't think of his accomplishments very much. But he was wonderful, and he was wonderful to me and to everybody he dealt with. He was a gentleman from word one. Great guy. I have done work with the Space Needle. If you think of Seattle, you think of rain, you think of Starbucks coffee, and maybe the Seattle the Pike Place Market, and definitely the Space Needle. So this iconic company that owns one restaurant, that's it. They own the land underneath, they own the structure, and it's just an amazing company. And it's the company that built it owns the restaurant. And really great people to work with. And we did some seafood marketing with them, the Alaska Seafood Marketing Institute, and Holland America and Alaska Airlines and so forth, and did this promo that also won the promotion of the year with Nation's Restaurants News on restaurant promos. And it's one of the top grossing restaurants in the country. So if you get to Seattle, go. And this is taken from the Chihuly Museum that is at the base of the Space Needle, looking up through the ceiling of the museum towards the Space Needle. My wife took that. My assignment tonight is to talk about brand. But I tend to get off track a little bit. But each one of these companies that I talked to you about developed a personality, a brand, a look, something that transcends, a food or a ride to the top of a tower, or a specific airline, or a cruise line, or something like that. They have personalities, and you know what they think. I mean, if you think of Starbucks, well, what other company is like Starbucks? I can't think of any. I mean, there are regional coffee companies. I mean, we have one in Seattle called Polly's, which and then you have the Dutch brothers.
Yeah.
That's a California, Oregon, because I've seen them in Oregon too. And they have good coffee. And then there are lots of small places. People's is out of Portland, I think. And there's a coffee company out of Portland and so forth. But Starbucks is the dominant brand when you think of a coffee company. And of course, they're everywhere. I mean, you've got them on campus. It's really interesting to know Starbucks because it started in a little shop at Pike Place Market, and you couldn't sit down and you couldn't buy a coffee and sit down because they didn't have any seating. It was takeout only, and they sold ground coffee only. And developing what this brand is transcended the fact that you now pay $3 for a cup of coffee. And it used to be spending $1 for a cup of coffee was about all you could charge, until they developed who they are and what they're about. I like to have my clients read a book, and I'm going to ask you to write this down, or at least put it in your memory to look this up. It's a book that was published in the 1980s. It's called Positioning: The Battle for Your Mind. It's a summary of the marketing classics on how we think about products and branding and positioning. And it's by Al Reese and Jack Trout. And if it isn't on your reading list, it should be. So, I'm not selling their books, but Amazon's got it. And it puts things in the proper context. We hear a lot about branding and what that is and what it isn't. But if you really go back to their book, and they called it positioning, it's how we think about products and how things work. So definitely get it and at least read it. And it's really, I give it to my clients because it helps them understand what it is I'm talking about. So great brands. Let's talk about some great brands. You've got Tiffany. Well, that's that crazy little turquoise box with a little ribbon on it. And we all know that a Tiffany diamond's got to be pretty good. And jewelry from Tiffany's. I don't think you had a Tiffany experience. I think you went to San Francisco. Yeah. Or in LA.
Yeah, you convinced them to come here.
Well, my daughter knows the closest way to take it. We have two. And so we always go shopping at Christmas time. And so she gets to choose her Christmas gift. So this year we ended up at Tiffany's. I wasn't surprised. She has good taste. And and things as mundane as French's mustard. I mean, that color of French's mustard is absolutely universal. The shape of the bottle, the script on the front. It's got that amazing mustard flavor. It's not the best mustard, but it sure tastes good on a hot dog. And I like it, and I have probably 2 or 3 other kinds of mustard in the refrigerator too. But I like mustard, and I like French's. And we know about that. I mean, how many other yellow mustards can you think of? Well, the challenge is this week. Did you see on CBS Morning News this week? Heinz has come out with a competitor of French's, because Heinz has the #1 selling ketchup, and French's is the #1 selling mustard, and Best Foods Hellmann's is the #1 selling mayonnaise. They're all owned by different companies. So people will buy ketchup, and they're going to put it in a twin pack so you can buy mustard and mayonnaise. So this is going to be interesting to see if Heinz is successful in challenging French's for the #1 product. So, and of course we know BMWs. I mean, the Bavarian Motor Works, and wonderful cars. The ultimate driving machine, and we know that they're well built and German engineered, and great cars, and great brand. Well, they've become the #1 luxury car maker in the world. They sell more luxury cars than anybody else, more than Mercedes, more than Audi, and certainly more than any of the American manufacturers. So their brand is really incredible. I had the opportunity to go to Munich one time, and their headquarters is right close by where the 1972 Olympics venue is. And it's a steel and glass building, and it's built in the shape of a 6-cylinder engine block. It's got 6 towers in it that are linked together. And if you know anything about cars, there's their trademark. It's like a 6-cylinder engine, and so it's really fascinating. I mean, to see this brand BMW, and the blue and white in the logo for BMW is a reflection of the Bavarian regional flag. It's blue and white, and that's where that logo comes from. So anyway, but that's their brand. Well, how about you? I did our little speed dating here this afternoon. Talking to you, and I'm asking, do you have a business card? Do you have, do you have a website? You can have a website. You can put your portfolio there, and some of you have done that. If you're getting ready to graduate, definitely invest a little time, a little effort, and put your portfolio on your website so you can, when you email somebody and say, I want to come work for you, I want an entry-level job, I want to go into advertising, I want to be a brand manager, or whatever, you can link that message right to your website, and they can look through your portfolio. And you need to do that. I have branded my own company, LaBrue Communications, and I shared this with the students earlier today, and we have a logo, and I'll pass it around if you want to see it later. But excuse me, we've got this logo, and we developed the black and metallic gray color scheme for it. It's on our letterhead, it's on our envelopes, it's on my business card, and this is a custom-made portfolio presentation folder that we use for everything. And we don't have a bound book about who we are. They're all individual sheets, and this is me, and this is one of my designers. But I was working with a really good photographer, and I said, I want you to shoot these like Richard Avedon. And I want that look. I want the black and white look. And it's different from anybody else in Seattle, and I'm really happy with it. We've had it for about 10 years, and I'm not even ready to change it yet. I'm really happy with how it looks. But this is our brand, and this is how people think of us, because frankly, we're not the cheapest agency in town, and we're certainly not the biggest, and we're not the smallest, but we have a niche that we do really good work. And you have to let us do really good work, or we don't want you as a client. Now that sounds a little arrogant, but Al Geller told me on his TV show, he had this wonderful closing at the end. He says, if you don't stand for something, you're liable to fall for anything. And there's a lot of truth to that, because we had to know who we were before we could sell it to anybody. If we were just going to be a wrist for somebody, or we were just going to do their ideas, there wasn't any reason for us. You can get a lot of people to do that. But if you want LaBrue Communications to do your work, and you want this history of successful projects, and you have just everything that you want to do, you've got to have a point of view. You've got to be able to go and say no sometimes. And sometimes you've got to be able to say, well, let's look at it from a different point of view. Or, I really wasn't thinking about approaching it like that. It's really important to have that self-knowledge that you can do something, and you can take their idea and you can make it better. So we're ready to move on. What makes your brand? Well, I asked everybody tonight, have you had an internship? What kind of agency do you want to work for? What kind of, where do you want to direct your career? You need to know that, because they're going to ask you, and if you don't have an answer, sorry, next. They're going to choose somebody else. You need to go in and present yourself, that you have some career path that you want. We talked today, one of the students wants to go into special events and do that sort of thing. My wife, my blessed wife, Linda, started out working with her current client doing special events. Well, she didn't realize that special events were going to include things like hiring Elton John for a birthday party. Elton John charges $1 million for a private party. She hired Willie Nelson for a different event. She works on the Microsoft CEO Summit, so she deals with Warren Buffett and Michael Dell and people from GE and United Technologies, and she has Martha Stewart on her speed dial. She has this incredible ability to pull all this stuff together, and you'd never know it at all. I mean, she doesn't talk about herself. She doesn't talk about what she does. She doesn't name drop. I name drop more than she does. So, but she's just incredible about being able to pull this stuff together. And so that's her brand. And she's worked for Bank of America in San Francisco at International World Headquarters for 14 years and supported a bunch of executives there. And then she went and got a job, supporting the regional vice president for CBS Television, and was the executive assistant to a major electronics company president, and just did incredible stuff. But she knew what she could do, and when she brought out her resume and she could talk about it, I mean, there's nothing this woman can't do. So that's her brand, and I'm totally amazed at what she can do. The positioning and battle for the mind has a lot to go about. We only can in our brains hold the knowledge for about 5 products max for any given category, whether it's automobiles or it's gum or so forth. So positioning is fighting for the place in your brain that recognizes various products and services. Where is it in that brain? Does Pepsi versus Coca-Cola versus 7-Up and Dr. Pepper, how do they all exist there? If I handed out paper tonight, and I've done this in class, because I used to teach at Seattle Central Community College, so I can we could only, we proved it, nobody could think of more than 5 products in the category. Whether it was cars or soft drinks, shoes, brands of shoes. I mean, everybody knows Nike and Adidas and Puma. But after you start thinking about that, you're like, well, what other ones are there? We just don't think of that sort of thing. So most people can't think of these can't think of 5 products or more in a category. But how do we decide which one we want for various things? I mean, after you get past UPS and maybe FedEx, well, DHL, who else is out there in that category? Of course, when you've got a distinctive color like Ferrari, that's a patent, not a patent, but a copyrighted color. You cannot, as a manufacturer, you can't put that color on your car because that color chip is copyrighted and protected. So you can't go to Mayco and get it. Or you can't buy a Chevrolet that color. Starbucks, they've got their mermaid, and I have to tell you, the first logo that they did for Starbucks way back when was not exactly G-rated like this one. She had a bare chest and it was rather provocative. And Starbucks' name comes from a character in Call Me Ishmael, Herman Melville's Moby Dick, yes. Microsoft, would Microsoft, would the coffee be as good if it came in a mug like that? Think of it. We think Starbucks, but it comes in the green, and that's what it tastes like. But if you presented it in a different other well-known things. I mean, Microsoft certainly is not known for coffee, but would it taste the same? Probably not. And like I told you, Starbucks started in the Pike Place Market, but that's also part of Seattle's brand too. I mean, there's 5 places that people think of going in Seattle, and that's one of them. That's the #1 attraction in Seattle, is the Pike Place Market. It's free, it's open every day, really interesting place. If you ever get to Seattle, go. The American Brands Council has said that they have copious amounts of research on this. And we've had a visitor. What's his brand? People will pay extra for a product or service that they know and trust. And it's just been proven time after time. So when you're doing building a brand for a company or a service or something like that, you really need to think that this is money, this is going to come back and your return on your investment in this brand building. So I really, I'm not just talking about this. This is not theory, this is fact. So I was talking to a student tonight, and she's going to Thailand. And Taylor? Yes. Where's Taylor? Well, anyway, she's going to Thailand, and she was asking me about it. And I got to go to Thailand a couple of years ago on this food project, and then I went on another project. And if you ever get a chance to go to Thailand, go. It's underrated country, but it is fabulous. It's really, really nice. And so I was on this, I went to Pattaya, which is one of the beach communities. And there was a lady on the bus, and she said, I want a McDonald's hamburger. And so the guide was really, really nice, and we were kind of like, why would you want a McDonald's hamburger in Thailand? Food is fabulous here. And so he said, well, go down the street, turn right, and it's a couple blocks. And so she came back about 20 minutes later, and she says, well, I couldn't find it. There wasn't a McDonald's down there. And he said, well, it's a hamburger restaurant, and they make really good hamburgers. She said, no, I want a McDonald's hamburger. And we're thinking, in Pattaya, Thailand, you're going to find a McDonald's? And why would you want McDonald's? But in her mind, she wanted the experience. She wanted to go into a hamburger restaurant, a fast food restaurant that she knew, and she knew the menu, and she knew what she was going to buy, and she was willing to pay a premium for it, even though it probably wasn't as good as the food she could have bought from any of the other restaurants on the street. But in her mind, she understood the brand. And as you go around the world, and I've been to Hong Kong and had McDonald's, they serve rice with the hamburgers there, which I thought was cool. And you can get egg rolls too. But in Paris, on the Champs-Élysées, they've got this wonderful 2-story McDonald's, and you can get a glass of wine and beer, and they love their pommes frites, and they in Belgium the French fries come with mayonnaise instead of ketchup, which I thought was really pretty good. The French fries, the pommes frites in Belgium are excellent anyway. You can buy them on the street, and they come in a cone, and they put the French fries in it, and then they give you a cup of this delicious mayonnaise, and you dip the French fries in that, and you get it from McDonald's, because that's part of their culture, and they do make some things on it. But you can go to South America, you can go to China, you pretty much get the hamburgers that in the same menu, but some other things too. But they definitely have an incredible brand. Let's go. We're exposed to, and this number is flexible because I've heard as many as 7,000, as few as 2,500. But we get 4,000 commercial messages a day, and I'll tell you, I'm staying on the other end of Shaw Avenue, and I think I got 4,000 messages just driving in between Fresno State and my hotel. Definitely, we're just bombarded with it. I mean, how much of it do we really remember? How much of it can we assume from or assimilate from everything that's going on, whether it's radio or television or online or whatever? How do you choose? How do you discern that? How do consumers decide one for another? It's really very, very difficult for people to filter out all this information. I mean, I can ask you, I'm going to hands here, Google, Yahoo, or Bing, who uses Google? 80% of America does. Yahoo? Yeah, that's about right. Bing? Yeah, that's right. This is a microcosm of the entire market. You just proved that Google has the 80% of the search engine market. So, even though I live in Seattle and I think Bing is probably better, my default things are set to. We miss Toyota and Mazda. Toyota sells far more cars than Mazda does, but the car magazines and consumer reports and so forth says that Mazda 6 is a far better car than the Toyota Camry. And the people have an image of what Toyota is and what a Camry is, and people have an image of Mazda maybe, and don't necessarily think about that. So, when you buy your next car. Now, my work for Nordstrom, I talked to you at length about that before, but it's really, really a strong brand. But I want to tell you that the logo and their packaging and so forth really isn't what Nordstrom is about. Once you become a Nordstrom shopper, you'll understand that it's customer service that makes their brand. And I want to tell you a few little stories. They have an anniversary sale every year, and it's in July. And the deal is that they bring new merchandise into the store for fall, only they put it on sale the first day. And it only lasts for 2 weeks, and you can go into the store and you see all these new fashions. They're all on sale, and they buy a lot of merchandise for the anniversary sale. It is like opening day at the Mariners. I mean, there are lines outside the store. It is just incredibly full. But they know this, so instead of having one register in the point of view department, which is young ladies attire, they'll have 6 registers, and they'll have 18 people working there that are putting the merchandise in the bags and running the credit cards and so forth. But it only works because they have this incredible return policy. It doesn't matter where you bought it, how long you've had it, and you don't even need to have a receipt, they will give you your money back. This changed the fundamental consumer behavior in the Pacific Northwest and in every market where a Nordstrom store existed. You couldn't do that in Sears, you couldn't do it in Macy's, you couldn't do it in Macy's, you couldn't do, I don't know if any of you remember Gottschalk's. It was here in Seattle. I mean, here in Fresno. I mean, it was a great store. They bought some stores in the Pacific Northwest, and they just bombed because they didn't understand their return policy. It was this fundamental misunderstanding of the consumer market that put them out of business. And it was just, if they had asked, or they'd done any research, or they had done, talked to anybody who was in retail for 5 minutes, they would have told them, you can't run your stores up there against Nordstrom and not have the same policy. Now, at least in the Pacific Northwest, Macy's, Penny's, Sears, all the other stores that compete against Nordstrom also have that policy. They have much more liberal return policies than ever. Now, they're not always so good, and maybe you have to get store credit or something like that. But everybody who deals with Nordstrom now will give you your money back or better. So, we're talking about not the logo, because I didn't design this one. I worked on some others, but they didn't choose mine. And I think it's really pretty bland, and their stores are really nice. They're emporiums of wonderful. You can go and you can find everything. And the people that work in the stores are great. I have a quick little story. I was working for Cucina in the year to know, and I had been traveling all around the 5 western states, and I was coming in, and it was 2 days before Christmas, and I didn't have time to shop. So I put together a list of things that my wife and daughter and stepson said they wanted, and things for other family members. And I took the list, and this is the age of fax. I faxed it to their personal shopper. I said, I'm going to be in the Nordstrom store in Bellevue, Washington at 11 o'clock because at 4 o'clock we're leaving to go to our lodge that we have in Lake Chelan in Eastern Washington. And I'm going to have 5 hours to do all my Christmas shopping. And can you help me? Can you give me something on these various categories? So I got there at 11 o'clock. The lady had taken the counter like this, took me into a little private room. She had something for everything in the right size, in a couple of colors, and you know, shoes and alternatives and everything I asked for and some other things. And I said, okay, I'll take that, that. She said, okay, here's a coupon for some coffee in our coffee bar. Can you come back in 15 minutes? And I came back, everything was wrapped, beautifully wrapped. It was in shopping bags, it was tagged with what it was for, and who it was for. And I walked out, you know, in less than half an hour. All my Christmas shopping was done. And I got big reviews, great reviews. I spent more than I should have, but you know, it got me off the hook, and we could leave by 4 o'clock, and we had everything we needed. So that's the kind of service that is their brand. And don't think it's just, you know, what they're wearing, you know, the uniforms or the logo or the bags or something. You know, Tiffany's does a better job on packaging than Nordstrom ever did. But people who live in towns where there's Nordstrom really did this. So I want to say that the service that you get with Alaska Airlines that transcends their blue and white aircraft. It's the service you get from Nordstrom and Starbucks when they expand into a new market. They change the whole dynamic of customer service and how you interact with their baristas and their people are trained. They make coffee and serve it to you in a different way than you probably ever had coffee before. And the fact that they present their coffee shops as the third place. It's not home, it's not work, it's the third place. You can go there, you can spend the whole day if you want, nobody's going to tell you to leave. That's a European concept. When I went to Italy for the first time in 1972, I couldn't leave. I could sit down with a cup of espresso and I could stay there the rest of the day. I could read the newspaper, I could, you know, write postcards, I could do whatever I wanted. It never asked me to leave. It never said, well, my time is up here and I'm going to have to get the check, or we're going to close this section and you're going to have to move over there, which is typical in the United States. I mean, you go to Denny's, that's how they treat you. But Denny's doesn't charge $3 for a cup of coffee. And really, at Starbucks, you don't have to buy anything. You just go in with your laptop and, you know, find a little table and it's yours until you want to leave. But that concept and that service level, I mean, I told you we have a place at Lake Chelan in Eastern Washington. Well, Lake Chelan is this little Eastern Washington town. There aren't any good restaurants there. You know, people are just kind of part-time and they just kind of, they're very diffident in customer service, let's put it that way. Nice people, but they've never been trained. They haven't grown up around a Nordstrom, so they don't really know how Nordstrom. So I met, when I was at our place, I was in the gym one day, and I met the guy that's in charge of training everybody at Nordstrom, at Starbucks. And a really nice guy, he's a runner, and we got chatting and so forth. I said, how do you do it? And he says, we just have the most incredible trainers and the most incredible way of bringing people into a Starbucks employee, that they know how to be polite, they know how to be professional, and they know how to do their job well, and they look at you in the eye, and they train these people, and they're just wonderful. And so when you go into a small town and you go to Starbucks, you really know what you're going to get. You really do. You're not going to get bad service. And there's nobody named Flo that works at Starbucks. So I say that. Now, I have only experienced this once, but the new airline in North America is Emirates. And if you ever get a chance to fly on Emirates Airlines, oh my gosh, it is the way planes used to be. The ladies, and then they're all ladies because they don't have any male flight attendants that work there. They have the most incredible makeup. Their nails are perfectly done. Their uniforms are these bright red outfits, and they've got the hat with a little scarf. And they are the most professional people I have ever seen. They just exude professionalism. I found out that most airlines have 6 weeks for training for a flight attendant. Their training is 6 months. This is what Pan Am used to be back in the 70s. It is fabulous. So if you have the opportunity to fly Emirates, do it.